Hello and welcome to the trade setup. In this video we are looking at Oklo. It is time for another update, and on this chart, since we have broken the area of support that would have allowed us to still look for a potential wave 3 to form directly within the idea of an impulse within this area, we have been focusing only on this other interpretation of a larger leading diagonal. Not because this was the only scenario, the only structure available to us, but because we have been tracking both of these as our preferred interpretations for a larger uptrend, and we have given up on the idea of a direct wave 3 to form within this area ever since we actually broke the $109 level, that being our last level of support for this interpretation. So we have been focusing on this idea where we were tracking a larger A, B, C structure within this wave 3 to look for this wave B correction to form into this white area of support. Now, in this structure, since we have extended even further, since we have followed through within our rather more bearish interpretation, I have started considering that it might be time to look for potentially an alternative, more bearish scenario than what we have here on the large time frame, because since we have failed holding this idea of an impulse, this has been our only larger time frame interpretation we have been actively tracking with an actual count on the chart here. So I'm looking to consider a different pattern that would allow a much deeper retracement. Now, before we go into that, I wanted to provide some context of what we were tracking in the previous videos. So we have been looking for at least a large correction in an ABC structure. We needed to break the relevant levels of resistance anyway for a signal that a more substantial bottom would be in place, and that was up to the $156.4 level. Since we didn't manage to break even internal levels of resistance, which would have allowed this to form as a leading diagonal to the downside, we had this orange structure with resistance up to the $113.6, we need to start look for potentially even further extensions to lower prices, because it's not looking necessarily good from this time frame perspective. It seems like it will prefer to form continuation even lower. Now, to be clear, this is not necessary. It is technically possible for this to have been the wave B top and to form a rather shorter wave C within this area, but I am cautious. I would still require evidence, especially since this is no longer a highly reliable structure. This is no longer within a proven uptrend where we have levels that would allow clear invalidation and a clear shift into much deeper prices, Our promising structure within this chart was only applicable as long as we were holding the idea of a potential impulse, where the last level of support was again the $109 level. That was our signal that much lower prices would be coming, and we have seen since that, like, what is this, another 40% drop? We are looking at over 40% to the lowest point since our last level of support within the idea of an impulse. That was our signal. We expected this to be coming, and now we are looking at potentially a larger initial 5-wave move to the downside that would suggest, after a 3-wave correction, yet another 5-wave move to the downside. Now, the reason we haven't been looking for this to already be a wave 3 in place was the idea that we didn't reach the ideal target for this as a wave 3, because the initial wave 1 to the upside would have allowed such a structure to form an impulse, but we have only gotten to the 100% extension of the initial wave to the upside. That is strongly telling us that yes, we are looking much more likely to have formed a wave C within this structure than a wave 3. We are looking at a potential A, B, C pattern where in fact the ideal target for a wave C is the 100% extension of a wave A. So I want to bring this scenario on the chart where we have an A, B, C structure in place, and we would be looking for either a larger top, a substantial top that would allow even continuation to all-time lows, or at least a larger wave 1 to the upside within a larger leading diagonal, something like that. Could also be a wave A, but in the end we would track an area of support for this alternative interpretation to much deeper levels where the first support would be only at the $49.5. And not only that, this isn't even a reliable structure to track for continuation to higher prices because we are looking at a three-wave pattern. We don't have any strong indication that this would expect trend continuation. Yeah, this area of support would be able to tell us if broken, yeah, at the $11.6 level, that something more bearish would be going on, that we should expect continuation to new all-time lows, but it's not suggesting to us strongly that we would be looking for a next wave to the upside. So on this chart, we will have to identify an initial 5-wave move to the upside, especially at this point when from a larger time frame perspective, it does look like we might have a 5-wave move to the downside instead. So right now I'm focusing still on continuation to lower prices, but short term we might actually see more of a reversal, more of a relief rally, since we do start to see some more strength forming within this area. Now, again, these are highly unreliable structures, these are low quality structures, and I wanted to mention our channel newsletter where you get access to our monthly top picks where we identify for you high quality structures, yeah, nothing like this, where you have clear accumulation areas with clear levels of invalidation. All you need to do is sign up, the link is in the description and it is completely free. You can then get the list, which you can then follow along with us on YouTube, yeah? You will have your trade setup approved watch list to track and to follow along, and we will be sending out our first list this weekend. Now, let's get back to the chart. So, within this structure, once again, we are looking still preferably for continuation to lower prices. I can track a reset of this wave A in green for another area of resistance in case of an attempt to break out and, yeah, form the next wave to the upside. And our last level of resistance in this case sits at the $151 level, the 78.6% retracement. In the case of the orange structure, this would basically assume that this pattern is complete and we would be looking for any additional lows, but based on the internal movement that has been forming in this wave 5, I see some interesting developments actually, because I would have expected to build an ABC structure within this wave 5 since we have been tracking a leading diagonal in this movement. Now, the thing is, within some patterns I might be able to do that, but I actually prefer that this would be tracked as a 5-wave move to the downside instead of a 3-wave pattern, which means that this would not be able to be reliably tracked as the wave 5 itself. So I'm considering either that this was a wave 1 or this was a wave 1. In either case, it doesn't really matter because then I would track here, this is a wave 3, yeah, this or this, doesn't matter exactly, and then potentially a wave 4 here and a wave 5 that technically could have formed the bottom. So it would be an internal diagonal structure we would be tracking within this area, whether it is within a wave A of this 5th wave in orange or a wave C within our green interpretation we have highlighted previously, yeah? We have been considering that this could have been the wave C, part of the ABC structure. So technically, it is still possible to look for a 3-wave pattern to have formed to the downside, but there is even yet another case, another scenario, where realistically, this wave 3 in orange could just as fine be considered to have formed an extension, and I could be looking yet for another wave 4 correction and a 5th wave to the downside, because in this scenario, in this case, I would even expect this wave 3 to have an ABC structure, and since this is rather a formation of a 5-wave pattern, yeah, I would expect this to also work out. And it doesn't matter too much which interpretation, which count we use for this idea, because we would have similar levels of resistance, and until we break the $106.7 at the 61.8% retracement in orange, I cannot see a shift in the probabilities that this wave to the downside is complete, and I could very easily still see yet another extension even after a more substantial correction, and this allows the first level of resistance to sit here at the $74.9. And ultimately, I would still need to see the break above the 78.6% retracement in green for something truly more bullish to be going on. Yeah, that doesn't change, and for the wave B, the $94 level is the first resistance point. Now, internally, within this movement to the downside, I am able once again to track this as a complete structure in one way or the other. But this internal wave to the downside could also see extensions itself, so I'm tracking this as an ABC structure. This is valid as a full count within a wave 5. But, as always, we could be looking for even further extensions internally within this structure, and we will be tracking this within, let's say, this blue idea. So I'm watching the area of resistance for such an interpretation at the levels between the $65.9 all the way up to the $72.5. We have pushed in this movement the upside into the 61.8% retracement before creating already a more substantial reaction to the downside. But we actually see some interesting developments even here within the smaller time frame, where I am actually able to consider this to be an initial 5-wave move to the upside. Now, I wouldn't go as far as to overthink the exact count. I could just as well see it as a 3-wave pattern. It's not necessary to track it as a 5-wave pattern, but it's just an idea, and I would be tracking an area of support for continuation to higher prices, whether that is within this internal wave B in blue, whether that is within this larger wave 4 in orange, doesn't really matter to me. But what I'm focusing on is this 78.6% retracement in white at the $62 that would signal to us when broken that we are likely going to look for an extension within possibly this blue structure, potentially something even more bearish. But in the end, it's not to focus on the exact count, especially within such a small time frame. I couldn't care less if this is a 5-wave move to the upside or only a 3-wave pattern at this point. I would only focus personally on the area of support and the area of resistance, because it might have been interesting if it formed the most clear 5-wave move to the upside to look for a 3-wave correction and for continuation to higher prices. But this is not that. This is not the most clear structure. Sure, to the downside we only have a 3-wave pattern, but for me this is just not attractive. This seems more like gambling, which honestly may go more in one way than the other. Only within the pre-market trading, yeah, we might see that we are holding here, that we are still trending above the 78.6% retracement we are accumulating. And sure, the risk-reward ratio is certainly attractive from this time frame point of view, but these timeframes are always risky, also due to the pre-market trading that could just create large enough swings to alleviate any risk management you may want to apply within this time frame. But for now, these are the levels, this is the trade setup. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, don't forget to leave a like, don't forget to subscribe, and if you enjoy our content and you want to support us directly, check out our channel membership where you even get access to additional content. Other than that, let me know what else you would like me to cover, and I'll do my best to do that in the days and weeks ahead. And until then, I hope you have a nice day, and I hope to see you in the next video. Bye bye.